Welcome to episode 8 of Track Talk. Today, our guest is Richard Boake. Richard's 35 years old. He's from Aurora, Ontario. Plenty of racing experience. He actually runs and operates the Mosport Karting Center. He raced Pikes Peak. Welcome to Track Talk, Richard Boake. What did you get up to in the off season?
So I have a lot of jobs. I was working very hard because this is not the cheapest sport to pay for. So there's the off season for me kind of shifts my focus to the karting facility and my other business, which is a retail tire shop. So the fall is very busy with winter tires. And then as soon as that ends, our karting team heads down to Florida, and we spend some time in Florida with the kids training and running the national Florida Winter Tour. So they're actually there right now for the last round in Orlando. And then hopefully within the next 4 or 5 weeks, the snow will melt and track will open and we'll be ready to go here.
Are you a coach as well? Like, is that mainly what you do?
I don't work with one particular driver. And that being said, I'm involved larger than just the team. For me, I'm there to help grow the sport. And we have an involvement with our own team, but I also help out all the kids. Like if a Canadian kid or any kid from that's racing down there walks up to me and they're nervous and they say, Richard, what do I do on the start? I'm starting outside pole. I'm going to give that guy my honest opinion and tell him what I think he should do, and I'll watch his race, and afterwards we'll talk about it. What went right? What went wrong? What can you do differently? And so, I mean, I don't necessarily coach one person, but I'm there to help all the kids. If I see something, out on track that I think I could help benefit a kid, and we're walking by each other in the parking lot, I'll point it out, and I'm always there to try and give advice and guide these kids the right way.
Tell me how you got here. Like, where did this start?
So I was exposed to motorsports at a pretty young age. My dad was always involved in racing. He did a little bit of racing himself back in the day in karting. And I remember growing up, I would always go down to the Honda Indy on Friday and watch qualifying. So I was always very interested in it. And I think the first time I probably was exposed to karting, I think I went to Goodwood Kartways, and we were there to do just some rental laps. And I remember seeing a fast racing cart, and I was like mind blown because the ones that you get in the public rentals, you're always like pushing as hard as you can on the pedal, hoping that it's going to go faster. And I remember seeing that, and I asked my dad a million questions, and he just he answered them, but didn't really go any further with that. And then about a year later, he showed up one day with just an old Margay chassis in the back of his go-kart. And, looking back on it now, it was the biggest piece of junk ever. But I was so happy when he pulled into the driveway with that thing. Like, I was ecstatic. And so we had a lot of work to do to get it ready for racing. And we spent a couple months preparing it. I spent a full year practicing before I ever started racing. And then I think I did my first karting race in 99. And yeah, from then on, it's an addiction. It's like nothing I've ever done in my life. And it motivates you as a kid. It gives you something to look forward to. Looking at it from my parents' side of things, it was my biggest passion. So, I had to be a good kid. Otherwise, they would take racing away from me. So it probably kept me on the straight and narrow. I did pretty well in school because I knew that if I wanted to continue racing, I was going to have to, do all they wanted me to do. So
do you do any sort of mental or physical, any sort of sim training or anything like that during the off season?
I train physically. Like, I believe, whether you're competing competitively or just for everyday life, I think it's great to always exercise, always stay in shape. I think it helps you with clarity and thinking and just, overall general life. So I'm a big believer in eating healthy and exercising. Sim racing, I believe that it is beneficial. I personally cannot sit down on a sim for more than 10 minutes. I don't know if I don't have the greatest attention span for it, or if it's, I've never been a video game player. I can't just stare at a screen. I find it burns my eyes. I do think there's lots of benefits that kids can get out of sim training. I think it's very good for training your eyes and your vision because you don't have the feel of the car accelerating and decelerating. So you're picking up all of those cues based on vision, which I think is really good. Um, but as for me, I also don't have very much time, and when I get home, the last thing that I will be able to do is go sit on a sim for a couple hours. I would probably do the sim just to learn which way the corners go, but not to find brake markers and bumps in the road and stuff like that. Like back in the day when we started karting, um, there were no sims, there was no YouTube videos to go watch. It was show up at the track, you did a track walk, you had a couple sessions to learn the track, and it taught you that you had to figure things out really fast. And I believe that's one of the things kids are struggling with today's day and age is learning on their own and learning tracks fast. When you get into car racing, you don't get 3 days of practice at a track. You go to Toronto Indy, you get one practice session. It's usually riddled with caution flags and red flags, and then you go right into qualifying. So if you need hours and hours on a sim to learn the track, you're going to struggle. So I'm a big believer in just figuring out what helps you learn and doing that. I can show up at a track that I've never been to, that I've never seen, and I'm confident, the first session can be half of it can be a recon and half of it I can start pushing. And I'm usually very confident in my pace and my ability after one session.
What's maybe 2 to 3 things that you look for as soon as you get going on a track walk?
References are the key to consistency. If you're coming into every corner and you're just kind of doing it by the seat of your pants, like, looking at the corner as you're coming up to it and deciding where you're going to brake, you're never going to be consistent. If you can find a reference on the track that you use for your braking or for your marker, it becomes very easy. When I get to this spot, I brake. When I get to this spot, I turn. When I get to this spot, I hit the gas. So the track walk is usually just about picking up those references. If you can find references for all of those things, at that point, you're just connecting the dots and repeating the same thing lap after lap. And that is how you'll be consistent. And consistency wins races. Anyone can do a fast lap once or twice, but can you do that lap for 45 minutes the same every single lap? And that's kind of the difference. So for me, the first thing I do when I get to a track that I've never been to, track walk, try and find references. And then for the first couple laps of that session, are those references right? Do they work? Do I need to move them? Do I need different references? And, then just hit your marks from there every time.
All right. Talk to us a little bit about your mindset before you go out and race.
I find getting into a very calm zen is the way to go. And, if leading up to a race, if you're, thrashing, working on the car, if, you're stressed out, it's hard to really get into a mindset. So for me, I wake up from a nap super calm. I've had time to kind of go through, some different scenarios that can happen, on the start, how I think things are going to play out. And I feel like it gets me in a good frame of mind and ready to go.
So if you could race in any motorsport era, series, what would it be? What car?
I personally believe that we are racing in the best era of motorsports. The technology of these cars, how, like, if you think back even 10 or 15 years ago, if you told me that a TCR car was going to do a 121 around CTMP, bet you my life that would never happen. And last year, Jeremy proved to us that a TCR can do a 121.7 around Mosport, which is completely insane. So I love the era that we're in because these cars that we're driving are so incredible. Like the things that they can do are just fantastic. I do, growing up, I was a big British touring car fan, and like watching Jason Plato and the races that those guys used to have were incredible. So, any of the BTCC stuff, the World Touring Car stuff was incredible. I was a big V8 Supercars fan. So, I mean, honestly, you could plot me in to any of those cars in any era, and I would be super happy. I just feel like the cars have come such a long way right now. The racing is so good because of it. So I'm happy. I'm happy with today's day and age and when I'm racing.
How about, do you have any famous or well-known drivers that you looked up to growing up?
All successful drivers have a lot of the same traits. They're successful for a reason. They don't crash cars. They're very consistent. They're very fast. They have good feedback. They can work with engineers and they can figure out what they need to go faster. They're all very competitive. So, I believe they all have a lot of the same traits, and that's why they get to the level that they're at. I was very fortunate, and a lot of us Canadian young karters were very fortunate to have Ron Fellows as a mentor. So growing up, we had the Ron Fellows Karting Championship, which is still around today. It started in 2002. And we're now in 2023, and there's still the Ron Fellows Karting Championship. It has been a staple in Canadian motorsports for, a couple decades now. And I don't know if you've ever met Ron, but he's an amazing human being. And I say that not just from his racing ability, but to him as a person. And, me and Ron now, I kind of think of him as like a second dad. And, I instruct for him at CTMP, and we do a lot of stuff on the karting front. He makes time for everyone. Like the guy's won Le Mans 3 times. He's, won the Sebring 12-hour. He's done everything you can do. He's raced NASCAR at all different levels, won races at all different levels. And he still is one of the most humble human beings. He makes time for everyone. He comes to all of the karting races to, watch these kids as they develop, give them pointers. He's a role model that I aspired to be. He's a role model that I believe a lot of my generation aspired to be. And I think he's a large reason of why Canada produces a large amount of professional race car drivers. Like in my generation, in my year where we were racing every weekend, just drivers that went on to make it. You have Kyle Marcelli, you have Daniel Morad, Robert Wickens, James Hinchcliffe. Name an era where you have 6 people that came from a 45-minute circumference racing against each other that all went on to make it in professional sports car racing. Like I don't think you could find that anywhere in the world. And we had that coming out of Ontario. We have such a competitive motorsports development ladder in karting that it produces great racers, and we're still seeing it today. And I truly attribute that to Ron and the sponsors we've had along the way in karting, and he's been a great guy to have for Canadian motorsports.
So this is the hot lap, the rapid fire section. So
I'm a hot lap kind of guy.
All right, let's jump into it. So first one, wet or dry races, which do you prefer?
Flip a coin. We'll go in both.
Corner entry, apex, or exit, what's most important?
If you miss your corner entry, you probably miss the apex, and you're going to screw up the exit. So entry super important. That being said, if it's qualifying or racing, that question differs. In a race, never sacrifice your apex because you're going to get passed.
Bucket list track to drive.
Nürburgring.
The full Nordschleife?
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Bucket list event to attend as a fan.
Sports cars, I'd say the 12 Hours of Bathurst at Mount Panorama. Open wheel. I've always wanted to go to Monaco or Singapore.
Favorite Mario Kart character to play?
I was not a big Mario Kart guy, but I remember doing some research, and I believe Bowser has the fastest straight line speed, and I will always take straight line speed.
Do you have a Mario Kart power-up that you'd want to use on track if you could in real life?
If I could have used the banana peel at Toronto Indy on Sunday, I would have used it.
So we're jumping into the fan questions here. First one, how fast can you change a tire?
Pretty quick, but it depends on the size. But I would say like under a minute, on and off the rip.
So not F1 style, but we're in the realm of.
Are we talking just like off of the car? Are we talking like change a tire, like take the tire off the rim, put it back?
No rubber removal, just rim and tire.
I'm pretty quick, but I'm not the quickest because I'm like tall and lanky and my knees give out and stuff. So I don't pick me to be your tire guy.
Okay, and then the second one here, what racing experience do you have leading up to TCR? So maybe you don't include karts here because we talked about that, but everything in between.
I've been fortunate. I've raced a lot of stuff. I've raced Can-Am midgets, so like winged cars on pavement, on ovals. I've raced late model stock cars. I've done some ice racing. I've done some open wheel schools. I've never actually raced open wheel. And then I've done some high downforce, time attack sports car stuff. We did Pikes Peak in 2016, which was kind of like a rally. So I've kind of touched on a lot of different areas of racing.
Roll back a bit. You did Pikes Peak?
2016, I did Pikes Peak.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of the craziest experiences of my life. It was like nothing I've ever done before. You don't really get a lot of testing. You get pretty much three. So they split the mountain up into three different sections and you get 3 runs on each section. And then the first time you run the whole mountain is on race day. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with Pikes Peak, but like if you're an under 10-minute car, you're very fast. So we ended up with a 10:23. I lost power steering 3 corners in, and I fought the car all the way to the top. I got to the top. I couldn't even open a bottle of water. I had nothing left in me. I like collapsed. But we ended up doing a 10:23 time. Our theoretical was like a mid-9, which would have put us in like probably the top 100 people that have ever competed in Pikes Peak, which would have been nice to do. Unfortunately, we have not gone back to do it again. It's a pretty risky race. After living it and experiencing it, I kind of thought maybe once was.
Do you have any close calls? Any scary moments, code browns?
The first time, and again, this was kind of just, not knowing anything about the event and, altitude sickness. The first run that I did on the top section of the mountain, so I believe we were around 13,000 feet on the top section. I remember coming into a corner and I could see that the corner was tightening up. So it was a decreasing radius. I could see that it was like tightening up and I needed to slow down more, but I was accelerating. And I remember like thinking to myself, like, what are you doing? Like, get on the brakes. And then finally at the last second, I jammed on the brakes. I slid off the road and I got hung up on a manhole cover. And I was like teetering on, it was only like a 20-foot drop, but our weekend would have been done. It would have, destroyed the car. And so they pull me out. I drive back down the mountain and, I go to the team and they're like, Ricky, what happened? And I was like, guys, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. Like I could see the corner was getting tighter, but I couldn't get my foot from the accelerator to the brake to slow down. And so the race steward was standing there at the time. He's like, we should probably go to the ambulance and just get them to check you out, make sure everything's fine. So I walk over to the ambulance. They hook me up to an oxygen tester. And I remember the reading. It was 81, whatever the reading is for oxygen. He said, it's 81. And I said, is that good? And he goes, well, let's just put it this way. Walking around at sea level, you're probably around 100 to 105. At 95, you're considered too impaired to drive. You're at 81. He's like, you shouldn't even be walking.
Oh my
So
God.
it's like, okay. So I explained to him what happened. He's like, 100%. He's like, you have no cognitive ability at 81. You can't process decision making. So I ended up from that moment on, I went down the mountain, I drove into town, I bought an oxygen tank. I bought a supply of oxygen tank, like one for each of the team. And I walked around the rest of the week with oxygen on because I was terrified that was going to happen. Like I don't know. I feel like I didn't even realize that it was happening until it was too late. So yeah, we had a scary moment. And then I remember being strapped in, ready to go up the mountain. And I was 4th off. We qualified 4th out of all the cars. So I was 4th, set to go off. All the bikes had gone first. And I remember they red flagged it, and helicopter flew in, and a guy had a bad accident. He passed away, and I remember sitting there with my helmet on, being like, "What am I doing? Like, why am I here? I have nothing to prove. There's no gigantic paycheck on the line. Roger Penske is not going to give me a ride after this. Like, what am I doing?" And but at that point, you've come so far. Sponsors have put a lot of money into this. The teams put a lot of effort into this, and you feel like you don't want to let anyone down. And I mean, the moment the green flag dropped, all that was out of my head, and I was like full gas. Lost power steering. I came on the radio, said, "Guys, we just lost power steering." They're like, "Okay, well, we had a good run. Just try and get it to the top safely. Like, don't do anything crazy." And I remember I was like going down a straightaway, and I thought to myself, like, we did not just come all the way to Colorado, spend all this money, put all this effort in to just get to the top. I'm like, screw this. And so I just kind of he-maned the thing up the mountain, and we ended up doing pretty well. I think we finished 6th out of 100 people, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
Turned into a great event, but it was wild. I've never experienced, fear like I did at Pikes Peak. I've had lots of, big accomplishments where I've won races in karting and, won races in cars. But I feel like sometimes, you win a race and you're excited, but it doesn't feel like you've accomplished something big. Pikes Peak was a true accomplishment. It was just, we were out of our element. We were a fish out of water, and I think we did really well. And even though we didn't win, we didn't podium, it was like, that was an accomplishment. Like, just surviving that weekend was an accomplishment. And I think we had similar feelings to that this year with Frank and with Blanchet. The guys had a real tough stint for probably, the last 10 years in racing. And when we got that first podium at Calabogie, you could see it in Frank's eyes. He was emotional, and it felt like we won the Indy 500, he said. And it did. Sometimes it's not about the race that you won. It's everything that you've gone through to get there. And, sometimes a third place feels like a win when, you're probably good enough for 6th or 7th.
And then you guys went on to finish first place at Honda Indy.
Yeah. And then we did the unexpected again, and we got a win at Honda Indy on the Saturday. And, Frank was super happy, and the team was very happy. And listen, what those guys endured for the last 10 years of just not having results, being plagued with issues and gremlins. And, I can't say that if I went through all that, I would still be at the track pushing for wins. I probably would have gave up. Like, it is racing hard enough, dealing with the highs and lows year to year. I can't imagine, doing it for a decade. And, I think we showed last year what the team is capable with. Maybe we didn't have the fastest car. Maybe we were a little bit outgunned, but we were always, I don't think there was a team that didn't have a stopwatch on us. I don't think there was, a driver that wasn't worried about us. And I think that's an accomplishment. And, I'm looking forward to this year, and, hopefully we can fight for the championship and be a regular contender for wins, and, get Frank the championship he deserves.
I remember Honda Indy also being a really special day for you too.
Yeah. So actually, we got to dial it back a little bit. So 2016, when I did Pikes Peak, my engineer at the time was, his name was Sean. We called him Kookie. He passed away a week after Pikes Peak. So we get home, we're all on this high at what we had just completed. And he goes to take a vacation, and he gets into he's driving back from his vacation, and a guy crosses the center lane coming back from Wasaga and kills him. So, we've just gone through a whirlwind of emotions, the highs. We just spent 2 weeks in Colorado together. And, I'm sitting there thinking, how is this like fair? How is this possible? Like, I just signed myself up for the most dangerous race in the world, and I'm here. This guy's driving back from a vacation with his wife, and someone crosses over the center line, hits him, and he died. So it just so happens that the anniversary of his death falls on the Honda Indy weekend. So on that Saturday was the 2016, so the 6-year anniversary of his passing. And it was weird because I even remember, I don't know if you guys remember, but I was very sick that week. We'll let the cat out of the bag. I had COVID, but I was on the Friday when we went out, I was 7 days, so I was clear. We didn't break any laws, but I was still in rough shape. It put me down, and I even said to Frank, like, I don't know if I can race this weekend. I can barely function. Like, I don't think you want me operating this car. And none of the guys had any doubts. They wanted me to race. They were all good with it. And then I remember during that race, like, I was overheating inside the car. Like, I was like doubting, am I even gonna make it to the end? Like, I felt like I was gonna pass out. And I just remember thinking, like, nah, Sean's there, we got this. Like, there's no one that's taking this away from us. And so it was a super special day, and we're gonna do it again this year. Every year at the Toronto Indy. It's gonna be hard for someone to beat me at the Toronto Indy. You're gonna have to fight me real hard.
All odds against you. The car that you guys were driving last year wasn't super competitive against the newer Audis either.
We had the cards stacked against us, but when your back's in a corner, you come out swinging. That's what we did, and that's what we plan to do this year. So I'm super excited for things to come. We got a great team. Everyone's very pumped. Morale's high. So we're hoping we can come out of the box and show everyone, what we can do.
What, like, in your opinion, is like the logical steps or like the ladder within Canada?
So right now, I believe starting in karting is most important. It's a way to hone your skills, get your racecraft. The racing in karting is, in my opinion, better than any other form of motorsports in the world. You go down to a national race, or even, at our Canadian championships, you'll have 20 kids fighting within the top 0.2 of a second. Find me any sports car series in the world where you have 20 cars within 0.2 of a second. You won't have it. So the racecraft that they learn and develop in karting is incredible. Which is why you see so many of these young karters jump into cars, and you're like, where did this kid come from? How is he so good at 16? And it's like, well, he's, been a professional race car driver for the past 5 years, just in go-karts. So karting is the best. And then from there, I mean, this is the age-old discussion. Do you go open wheel? Do you go sports cars? And that's kind of a preference. That's kind of, your ability to find funding and sponsorship. I think it's every kid's dream at the beginning to go open wheel. I usually try and talk people out of that. I think if you're trying to make a career in motorsports, I think sports cars are the way to go. If you are fortunate enough to come up with a budget to go racing, that budget will last you a lot longer in sports cars than it will in open wheel. And you have a lot more possibilities of becoming a manufacturer driver, or, even being picked up by a privateer team that has their own funding. You could end up being a gold driver and racing in endurance racing with someone who pays the bills. So there's just a lot more, opportunities than fighting it out for 24 IndyCar seats or, 20 F1 seats.
Talk to us a little bit about sponsorship advice that you can give for anybody looking, within Canada to build their racing career and build their personal brand so that they can obtain sponsorship.
It's the hardest part of racing, I believe. Especially when, you're dealing with an economy that's going through ups and downs, and, we could be preparing for a tough recession. It's a hard one to answer. I don't think anyone has the right answer for it. All I can tell kids is don't be afraid of hearing no. You could hear 100 no's, but if you get one yes, it's that one step closer. So, I look at Kyle Marcelli, and I raced with Kyle my whole life. Great guy. Kyle's tenacity and just ability to market himself. Like he's such an incredible person. He's got an incredible mannerism about him. He just always carries himself the right way. And he worked really hard when he was younger to go and find sponsors. And that was probably, something that I needed to work harder at when I was younger. But I always kind of felt like, how can I get the return on investment? And that's a tough thing to do in motorsports because sometimes it's hard to find the intrinsic values. But that being said, you can't stop. So make your own little deck, try and set up meetings. And, I think if a 13-year-old kid tried to set up a sponsorship meeting with me, and he sent me his racing resume or a little deck that he put together, I would entertain it because I would be very impressed that he did all that and he wants to come and sit down with me. And whether or not I sponsored him or not, I would go through the process. I would entertain it because we have to mold these kids, and just saying no and not giving them the opportunities, I don't think is the right way. I will never say no to a kid who wants to work. Even if I don't have work for them, I will still hire them. Like, in today's generation, it's hard to find kids that want to work. And if someone does, I will always say yes.
To end it off, we kind of use the last question to sort of actually give the floor to you, your space to kind of shout anyone out specific, anything you got going on in your life you want to talk about.
Going on in my life, lots of stuff going on. There will be some news, hopefully within the coming weeks, for sure before the season starts. There's going to be a lot of changes in Ricky Bobby's life, which are going to be for the better, and they'll be for the better of motorsports. There's lots of cool stuff going on. Say a big shout out to the team, Frank Blanchet, Dave, all the guys, Brian, Scott. We're sadly going to be without our engineer this year, Craig. He's moved on to a different team. So I'm going to make him pay for that decision. He will regret every single day that he comes back. But I wish him the best. We're looking forward. We got the same group of guys coming back. I got my younger brother, Alex. He's going to be there. He'll be belting me in. Yeah, I'm super excited for the snow to melt and we can get testing and get the season going.
Where can people follow you online, Richard?
I do have Instagram. I believe my handle is Richard Boake Racing.
Thank you so much, Ricky Bobby.
Thank you guys. This is another episode of Track Talk with Sammy Baker and Jessica Benavides.
Still going bad on you anyway. Whoa.